I'm going to start the recording. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate this opportunity. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Malik. I'm a professor of Spanish, and I'm also the coordinator of Spanish and French in the World Languages Department at Onondaga Community College in Syracuse, New York. And I'm also the past chair of the ACTFL Distance Learning Special Interest Group, and I'm a visiting scholar with the Language Matters Research Consortium in the Department of Languages, Literatures, and Linguistics at Syracuse University. My pronouns are he, him, his. I tend to use Christopher when I write my name officially, but you're welcome to call me Chris. And I think I changed that yet. I renamed myself as such in Zoom as well. And I'm excited to be with you here today. My talk is titled Before, During, and After of a More Accessible Presentation. And again, thank you very much, Jamie, for inviting me to give this talk with you today. And I'm honored to have the chance to work with each of you today. So I'm on slide 2, and the title is PowerPoint Presentation Handout. So before we begin, I'd like to share the link to the resources for this presentation with you, and I'm just going to copy and paste it into the chat right now for you. Be just a moment. See if I can copy that link. I'm going to just stop my presentation for one moment while I copy and paste that into the chat here for you. Oh, and for some reason, not allowing me to do that. I apologize. This worked all yesterday for me. So let me just type this in real quick to the chat for you. So it's going to be http:// bit.ly. Oops, sorry about this. So http:// and all lowercase letters /CDH_OTTER21. And if we were to follow that link, it will allow you to download the resources. And so the resources that I've given you there are the actual PowerPoint itself that I'm using. I have a PDF of the PowerPoint, and I kind of put a transcript in there so you can, if you want to follow along later on afterwards, you're welcome to do so. And then I've given you a handout that you can use too. So it's a 2-page handout with some strategies, basically kind of summarizing all the strategies into a checklist of sorts for you. So I'm on slide 3, guidelines for participating. And before we begin, I'd like to just go over kind of a couple quick guidelines for participating here, just to make sure that this is accessible to everyone. First, if you answer a question aloud, so in other words, if you're not going to be answering by chat, please be sure to state your name before giving your answer. And this helps everyone know who you are. But it's especially helpful for interpreters or for the person who's doing the live captioning. And also would just ask that one person speak at a time. And again, this is helpful for interpreters or for someone who's doing live captioning too. So I'm on slide 4, and it's titled Introduction. And before I begin, I want us to think a little bit about some of the experiences that we might have had in the past before. So I'd ask you to first think if you can recall a time when you might have been part of a group that really understood each other. You know, this idea that you have inside jokes, things that everyone seems to understand, or just a really great experience where you felt this connection with lots of other people. How did you feel when this happened? How did you feel when you felt this connection with other people? You can type it in the chat. You can raise your hand, and then we can say it aloud. And again, I just ask if you just say your name before you say something aloud. How did you feel when this happened? I like that, happy, empowered. Yep. So thank you, Steve. It's a great idea. Thank you. Warm, expansive, excited. Yep. I apologize. Really small font on the chat here, and a sense of belonging. Also, excellent. Yep. So these are great ideas. Excellent. So if we think about this from the other side, unfortunately, if we think a little bit about maybe you've been in a situation where you felt left out. So maybe you felt like everybody else has this idea of what's going on around you. They're all laughing at some joke that you don't understand, and you felt very out of place. On the other side of the coin, it doesn't feel very good, right? And the idea is when we give our presentation, we want our audience to feel like we did in the first situation and not the second. So you've worked very hard to get your presentation together. You're very passionate about it, and you want other people to share in this passion too. But if your information isn't accessible to the members of your audience, or it's only accessible to some of them, then you're not going to instill that passion on them too. So today we're going to think about how we can make our future presentations as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So I'm on slide 5, titled Goals and Objectives. And I'd like to share some goals and some objectives with you before we begin, just so that we can know kind of where we're heading, what's going to be happening today. So first, the overarching goal is for each of you to lead this talk knowing strategies you can use to make your presentations more accessible. For example, in terms of our objectives, you'll be able to apply strategies to make a presentation more accessible. That could be at least 3 before, 3 during, and 1 after strategy. And hopefully you'll be able to use a checklist of strategies to help you to create a more accessible presentation. So I've moved on to slide 6, terminology. And before we move on, I just want to clarify a few terms that I'm going to use throughout this presentation. I'm going to use the terms presentations, venues, and then I'll talk about participants and audience too. So if I say, for example, the word presentation, I simply mean this is going to be some sort of event where you're sharing information with other people, whether that's a conference talk, a webinar, a lesson in the classroom, whatever it happens to be, whatever your presentation is. A lot of this will apply to your classroom as well as to a conference talk you give. Basically any event where information is shared. By venue, I mean the location. So where you're giving your presentation. So when we think physical spaces, it could be a conference room. When we think virtual spaces, the video conferencing platform. Another physical space, the classroom, or maybe a workshop is being held someplace. So your venue is where the location is where the presentation is taking place. And then when I refer to participants or audience, I mean the people with whom you share your information. These could be attendees, could be students, anybody who's taking part in this presentation, who's receiving the information that you're sharing with them. And so the information I'm going to share today, it can apply to a lot of different situations where information is shared. So I'm on slide 7, and it says essential strategies. And so if you did download the handout, you probably looked at it and said, well, okay, 2 pages, that's a lot to go over. And I'm going to go over quite a few of those throughout the presentation today. But for those of you who are beginners, I wanted to kind of give you what I feel are going to be the essential things to take away if you've never had any experience with accessibility before. If you have more experience, then hopefully there'll be some things you can take away too over the next 45 minutes so that you can feel like you've gotten something out of this presentation too. But basically these next few slides, these are going to be what I consider to be the essentials. And if then you want to learn more, go through, review the PowerPoint later, and you can take away some more strategies at that point. So I'm on slide 8, and it says the most important before strategies. And so a few important things you can do as you prepare your presentation. Some of these, I'm going to call them before strategies, for lack of a better way to put it. The first is to organize a minimal amount of content on each slide, but make sure to use slide titles, bullet points, and numbered lists. So too much text on a slide can be distracting, of course, but it can be especially difficult for an audience member with a disability to be able to follow the presentation. So use title plus content slides are especially important. And what I mean by title plus content is It has that title at the top, and then you can add your content in bullet points or numbered lists. And so using bullet points and numbered lists helps to keep the content organized for all members of your audience. A big one is multimedia. And so multimedia can refer to visuals, videos, audio clips. You'll want to ensure that these are accessible. So for example, visuals, we'll talk a little bit about alternative text. Videos, make sure they're captioned. If possible, have audio descriptions, but if audio descriptions aren't available, then be prepared to describe the visual content in the videos during the presentation. Audio clips, make sure there's a transcript. So the idea is you want to think about multimedia carefully, and can multimedia be perceived by everyone in your audience? I'd recommend running the Microsoft Office Accessibility Checker before you share your presentation. I'm going to give you the steps to do that in just a little bit, but I like to always remind people it's not a silver bullet. So there's certainly more you can do to make your presentations more accessible. And finally, if it's possible, and it isn't always possible, share your presentation with participants ahead of time, or if not, make sure to share it with them afterwards so they can be able to use the information later. But sharing it ahead of time is very helpful to all participants whenever possible. So I'm on slide 9. These are the most important during strategies, things that you can do while you're presenting. So you may have noticed me doing this, and it's basically I try to pause every time I advance a slide. Whenever I advance to a new slide, I like to read the slide number and the title of the slide too. So this is helpful, and we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on, but this is helpful to make your presentations more accessible to all members of your audience. If you have visual content that contains essential information, make sure that you're prepared to describe it. You don't need to describe just decorative images, and you'll see I have some decorative images throughout my presentation here today too. But you'll want to be sure to describe important information that are in visual content. And this helps everybody. It helps audience members who are blind or who have low vision, but also benefits everyone to know where to focus their attention on the visual content, whether that be tables or figures or images or what have you. And finally, if it's possible, use a microphone during the presentation. Now, of course, in a virtual environment, there's no getting past that. But even when you're in a physical environment, in a classroom, if there is the opportunity to use a microphone, it is something that can be very helpful to make your presentation more accessible. Especially if you're giving a workshop of sorts, especially a larger room, but even in a smaller room sometimes. Having a roving mic that you can hand to participants when they ask questions for Q&A is important. But having a microphone and using it is especially important if you have, for example, like we have today, live captions. That way, otherwise, there's really no way for the person providing live captions to be able to provide them to you, especially if they're in another place entirely. So on slide 10, it says, pause to consider. And just for a little break before we move on, I want us to think through, do some of you already use some of these strategies? Do you already think about multimedia when you give presentations? Do you already pause when you advance your slides? If you already use some of these strategies, which ones do you use already and how? Go ahead and type that in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and state your name and tell us which ones, whichever you prefer. Do you, for example, consider captioning or consider transcripts? Pausing between slides. Yep, excellent, excellent, yep. And as I found that, to me, it did take me a little while to get used to that. That was a suggestion. One thing I'm going to mention a little bit later on in the presentation is the idea that taking feedback from participants and then putting that into place. And that was feedback that I received from a participant that said, okay, you're moving a little fast. pause when you're advancing the slides. And so it took a little bit for me to get used to that, but it's something that's become just part of how I present now. Yep, I'm seeing describing visual content, captioning slide numbers on each slide, describing visual content. Yeah, I agree. It also is, I've had to train myself to describe the visual content. Now, you notice I'm not describing, for example, right now there's a little pixel person, and I'm a kind of a computer nerd. I found these little pixel people. I thought these were pretty cute. And so, I got them, they're little decorative images here and there. I'm not really describing those because the idea is they're more for decoration. It's not essential information. And are there any that you think would be easy to incorporate into your next presentation? Anything that you think, oh, I didn't ever think of this. I'm going to use this next time. One of the things that I've started doing recently is to pause to read the slide number in the title. And so that may be something up. Videos are easy to pull in. Yep, exactly. Oh, alt text for contact visuals. I need a test. Yes. Steve, that's an interesting one with the alt text also. What you'll find sometimes is publisher materials will sometimes have the alt text already in the PowerPoint presentations for you. Some don't. You have to look for that and see. But that can be helpful so you can see examples of alt text. And I'm going to give you some examples a little bit later on too. But that way you can see how much alt text to put in there. You don't have to give a paragraph, just 1 to 2 sentences at most. Describing any visual content you might use. Yep, excellent, excellent. This is great, great ideas. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I appreciate that. So now I want to get into a few more details now. I'm going to give quite a few more strategies and help you with this. I'm on slide 11, and it says preparing for more accessible presentation. I'm going to start with some before strategies. So again, if you take nothing away except what was on those previous slides, you're going to be doing a lot to make your presentations more accessible. But now let's dive into some more specific strategies that you can do before you give your presentation. So I'm on slide 12, titled PowerPoint Templates. And one thing that you might find is that just using the PowerPoint presentation templates from Microsoft can help you to have more accessible presentation. They tend to use higher contrast colors. They tend to use more common fonts. And so these templates, you find them, and I put an image on the screen here of PowerPoint, Mac OS. And this image is showing that if you click on the new tab that's in PowerPoint for Mac OS or PowerPoint for Windows too, you're presented with a selection of templates from which to choose. And so you choose one of those, and they tend to be accessible right out of the gate. So the idea would be you have these higher contrast colors, more common fonts that can be used by many people. I'm on slide 13, alternative text. And probably if there was any one thing that I'd say you could do to make your PowerPoints, especially your classroom PowerPoints, more accessible, is to include alternative text for images that contain information. So alternative text is a brief text-based description of non-textual content. And so this helps someone who cannot visually perceive the information that's in that visual content. Alt text may be used to describe an image using a screen reader to someone who is blind or who has low vision, for example. And for those of you who may not know what alternative text is, it's something you can't visually perceive just by looking at a slide or just by looking at a web page. It's in the background, in the code of the slide or the web page. But when a screen reader is accessing that content, it's read to them using the screen reader. And the idea is to include alternative text if essential information is conveyed only in an image. So I just put an example of alt text on this slide for you, and you won't be able to see it, of course, right now by looking at the slide, but you'll be able to access it later with the PowerPoint presentation. The picture that I just put on here is of a stack of blueberry pancakes and has berries and powdered sugar on top. So someone who uses a screen reader can access the alt text of this image and know the information that is in this image. And basically the alt text says stack of blueberry pancakes with powdered sugar. This image and alt text are provided as an example of alt text. So later on, you can access the alt text later, and then you can also add alt text to your PowerPoint presentations in the same way by right-clicking on the image and choosing Edit Alt Text. And thankfully, Microsoft has made it nice and easy for you to be able to do this now. It used to be more challenging. But the idea is only for images that contain information. So you've seen, like I said, little pixel people. They're just kind of there as decoration. They shouldn't be read by a screen reader if they're just decoration, and should be marked as decorative. But otherwise, anything that contains important information, you'll want to make sure that information is available to all. I'm on slide 14, design. And so if you do decide that you want to create your own PowerPoint templates, there are a few things you can do, or if you have PowerPoint templates you've downloaded from the internet, you can go through and do a few things with them too. And the big one is using large common fonts that are easily readable. And by large, at least 18, but preferably 24. Common fonts, Arial, Verdana, Calibri, Times New Roman, Helvetica, Tahoma, basically things that are easily readable from one computer to another. And so just, as an example, the font for the first level bullet points that I have here, this is Times New Roman 24. And the second, I believe, is 20, I think, Times New Roman 20. So it kind of gives you an idea that you wouldn't really want to go too much smaller than about 18 if you can avoid it. And cursive text, avoid cursive text as well. And this, it really depends on your environment. I was watching some of the presentations yesterday, and it's not as important with the way the live captions are being done, at least on my computer and here through Zoom. It seems like there's enough space to see the live captions, but I always recommend keep a little bit of space at the bottom of your slides too, just in case for the captions. So for example, uploading a captioned video of a presentation to a website like YouTube, you don't want the captions to be over the information that you have on your slides. So leaving a little bit of space at the bottom can be very helpful. I'm on slide 15, and it's titled Color. And the idea is being careful that color is not the only source of information in your presentation. So I'm going to give you a couple examples, just so you can see. So this first example that's on here, let me get my little pen going here. There we go. So the idea is if we wanted to get from, for example, Oxford Circus to Hyde Park Corner, and what I have here is a map of the London Underground. And so if we were to take some of the different ways to get from Oxford Circus to Hyde Park Corner, you could take what looks like here, it looks like the orange line, then you take the black line, then you take the purple line, and you get to Hyde Park Corner. The easiest way would be to take the brown line here down to Piccadilly Circus, and then take the purple line to Hyde Park Corner. I apologize, my pen is a little off there. So if you can visually perceive the color, you're doing just fine. You know how to get there. You know, for example, that you can't take Oxford Circus to Tottenham Court Road and then take a direct line to Hyde Park Corner. It's just not possible because you see that it's a different color line. However, if I were to take away the color, as in the second image that I put here, you wouldn't know if you could get from Oxford Circus to Hyde Park Corner in only 2 lines through Tottenham Court Road, for example. The idea is that color is the only source of information in the map that I have on the left-hand side. So if we think about maybe an academic setting of how this could pertain to an academic setting, if you have a multiple choice test, and you're giving the answers to the multiple choice test to students. And the way you do that is to give them the original test, but then to highlight the correct answer in green. And the reason I say this one is I had done this at one point when I was teaching. A lot of this is things that I've learned myself over the years. By highlighting it in green and saying the correct answer is in green, this is not going to be accessible to someone using a screen reader. Because screen readers don't tell the user the different color, doesn't tell underline, bold-faced, italicized, even thinking about location. of one object to another. So for example, saying that this reading, read the reading below, and then answer the questions. You want to make sure that color and underline, boldface, italicized, and location aren't the only sources of information, because it's not going to be accessible to all. Oh, good. So I'm seeing a question in the chat. Let me address that here. So if you teach a professional program with technical entry standards, the ability to make visual color interpretations, are you still required to have alt text legally? Good question. I would actually speak to someone on your campus about that. I would say you'd want to talk to probably your Office of Accessibility resource on your campus. And I always try my best to refer people as possible when it comes to a lot of the legal questions about these things. I would definitely talk to them, find out what the policies are on your campus and that sort of thing too. Find out what they believe legally you should be doing. And so, yes, working with our Office of Accessibility Resources, they are fantastic at OCC and at Onondaga Community College. And so I have them on speed dial. I guess you could say I always go to them whenever I have questions, and I'd recommend the same thing for sure. Yep. Good question. And Steve, at least strongly encourage the need for alt text for a variety of causes may not map on technical interest. Yep. So yeah, I would definitely talk to the Office of Accessibility Resources just to make sure that you're doing what they recommend you do. I'm on slide 16, contrast. And so you want to be careful about high contrast colors. So for example, black on white, for example. I'll put a couple examples on here of good contrast and poor contrast. So for example, good contrast might be black text on a white background. Good contrast could be black text on a yellow background. Poor contrast might be maroon on a black background, orange on a blue background, that sort of thing. You can use technology to your advantage to help you to determine if you have sufficient contrast. And I've put two links on the PowerPoint that you can take a look at afterwards. One is Color Contrast Analyzer, and I believe actually I misspelled it. It seems to have autocorrected. It's actually YZER, it's the British spelling. Or no, actually it is SER, the British spelling. So Color Contrast Analyzer and then WebAIM Contrast Checker are two ways you can check the foreground and background colors to see if you have contrast that meets WCAG accessibility standards. In slide 17, organization. So again, as I mentioned earlier, title plus content layout. So include a title in each of your slides, make sure each of the titles is different. And then this can be especially helpful for someone who uses a screen reader, because they can move from one slide to another during the presentation and then later when they review the information on their own. And you can also help to ensure accessibility by being sure that your information is grouped into bulleted or numbered lists. And again, it's that idea of the title plus content slides will help you to really be able to organize those in an accessible way. So I'm on slide 18, multimedia visuals. I just want to give a little bit more information, then we'll pause and think through some of these together here. So in terms of making your multimedia accessible to the members of your audience, we talked earlier about visuals, including alternative text. So this is, again, a text-based description of non-textual content. But also be prepared to describe the visuals during your presentation. So remember, any visuals that are source information so that all members of your audience can access that information. And I'd encourage you, especially at like a conference presentation, for example, to be careful not to make the tables and figures overly complex and save those for the journal article. Basically, it would be the idea. Maybe present a simplified version of a table or a figure. And if you really do have to have that highly specialized or highly nuanced image, you may want to explain that in the notes of the PowerPoint, so that can be shared and read about a little bit later on. On slide 19, multimedia videos. As I mentioned earlier, be careful that videos have captions and audio descriptions. I'd recommend being prepared to give a brief description of the video before showing it. And this makes the content more accessible and usable by all members of the audience. It can serve as an advanced organizer to all members of the audience. And if audio descriptions aren't available, be prepared to describe the visual content to participants. And one question that I've gotten quite a bit is, what are audio descriptions? In many ways, it's understood, I think, a little bit more than maybe about 10 years ago, but still, I always like to show kind of just a brief example. And this is a recent one that I found. On slide 20, audio descriptions. So the first thing I've done is I've added alt text to this video. And the alt text of the video says video titled, "What are audio descriptions?" And this video gives a brief description of what audio descriptions are and provides examples of audio descriptions from the Netflix program Stranger Things. So I might then give a brief description of what is going to be in this video. And it can serve as an advanced organizer for all participants, but also help someone who is blind or who has low vision to know what's going to be seen in the video. An example description might be, this video is going to give a brief description of what audio descriptions are. It's also going to provide examples of audio descriptions. Some people will speak about their experience using audio descriptions. We'll also hear some examples of audio descriptions that are used in the Netflix program Stranger Things. I believe I've turned on the audio so you can all hear this. If not, I do apologize. I'm pretty sure I clicked the audio ahead of time though. I'll only show just about 30 seconds to a minute at most. Oops. There it is. I apologize. Turn off my pen here. There we go.
Just watch a movie and close your eyes, and you can't follow most movies with just listening. Be like, who's that? What's going on?
Police lights flash on the front of the buyer's house as Officer Callahan stands outside with Joyce and Jonathan.
Audio description is a description of the action that's going on in between the dialogue.
Inside the dark house, Hopper walks down the hallway with a flashlight.
For blind people, having that audio description, it becomes their eyes.
I definitely say Orange is the New Black, Stranger Things and Game of Thrones have been my audio description highlights.
11 closes her eyes. Elsewhere in the lab, the man from the photo sits at a table with a piece of paper.
I can't see anything at all. So actually, I've never had audio description on life, as it were. So having it on TV is a great start.
I use it for watching TV programs, for film.
And I'll stop it here because it does show some of the a few more graphic images, unfortunately, from Stranger Things. So just so that we don't get to any of those here, in case it might be sensitive to those. Slide 21 is titled Multimedia Audio Clips. So on a similar note as providing captions for videos, providing a transcript for audio clips or for audio files. They can be provided in the chat of a webinar, in the notes section of a PowerPoint, any place that makes sense, given your context. Just a couple more things in terms of preparing our presentations. So slide 22 says flashing lights and moving text. And again, you'll want to be careful to avoid text that moves very quickly, anything that flashes, anything that spins a lot. And of course, avoiding any strobe effects, flashing lights. This can be especially dangerous, can cause seizures. I think we're long past the days of the 1990s web pages that had those flashing lights and that sort of thing. On slide 23, activities. We'll want to think carefully, especially for our in-person presentations. How are audience members going to participate in activities? If an activity involves moving around the room, can everyone participate? For example, can someone who uses a wheelchair participate in the activity? Is there enough space? Is there going to be enough space for someone who has a service animal, for example? Want to think about other options available if not everyone can participate. And what about physical manipulatives, whether that be handouts, index cards, whatever it happens to be? Are there other options available, maybe electronic versions of the handouts? And speaking of that handout also, is it in an accessible electronic format so that everyone can access it? In other words, you may want to think, are there options for completing the activity? And that could go for in-person workshops, that could go for our classroom activities. Is there more than one way to complete that activity? And that will still get someone to meet the objective, the learning objective of that activity. Finally, on slide 24, Microsoft Office Accessibility Checker. So you've gone through all of these things that we've talked about on your own. Microsoft Office has this accessibility checker that can help you to check for common accessibility concerns you may have missed. So first, open your PowerPoint, check it over yourself using some of the things that I've told you up until now. Then click the Review tab. Click Check Accessibility. And from there, you're going to see the accessibility menu appear, and it has the inspection results. What's really neat is the additional information area will provide suggestions for addressing these concerns. So again, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to catch everything for you. But what's really neat is, for example, it'll tell you if you have multiple slides with the same title. So it's as easy as clicking on that slide, change the title, and then it takes it right out of your accessibility checker for you. And I'm on slide 25 called Going the Extra Mile. So if you're already here thinking about accessibility, maybe go the extra mile and write a brief little script for it too. And while you're at it, provide the script as a transcript to your participants, because this can help you, especially if you're making a video of your presentation. Helps you to stay on task, helps you so you don't go off on tangents. If you share the transcript, it helps participants who are deaf or hard of hearing. If you share the PowerPoint ahead of time, then this can be helpful to interpreters or those who are doing live captions. And that transcript could be in the notes section of the PowerPoint. And that's what I've done for this PowerPoint, so you can see that you can take the notes of this PowerPoint and then go through and read it on your own time. Just a couple little things about physical spaces, and then we want to take a little bit of time to pause to consider here. So yes, we're in a virtual environment today. And if we want to talk about preparing the venue, and I'm on slide 26 now, we'll want to think about, can someone using a wheelchair be able to use the venue that we're in? Is there space for service animals? And I put a link on the PowerPoint here for you that you can take a look at later. And you can share this with the maintenance and facilities department at your college campus for the ADA fixed seating and tables guide. If you take a look and see, can everyone see the screen from all seats in the room? This goes for classrooms too. On slide 27, preparing the venue, the second one, is there an accessible gender neutral bathroom available? Take note of where it's located, if so that you can let other people know, especially if you're in charge of a full day workshop, let's say. And I'm very careful to always check for a sound system or microphone, because if you bring your own microphone or if you use a microphone that's already there, it's very helpful and very important for accessibility. It helps with live captioning, because the person doing live captioning may not be anywhere near you. They may be in a completely different part of the country. The presentation I gave recently, the person doing live captioning was in Texas. So having a microphone was absolutely essential to be sure the live captioning was able to be done. On slide 28, preparing the venue 3, you'll want to make sure that the place is clearly signed, make sure people know where to park, know where the accessible entrance is so that you can provide directions from the parking lot to the accessible entrance, and then make sure that there are directions from the accessible entrance to the room itself. So when you're preparing the actual venue itself for some sort of multi-day workshop or a full day workshop or conference or who knows what, it'll be something that can be easily found. And this again comes from, this next one comes from my own personal experience. I wrote on the slide here, is there sufficient lighting? Are lights too bright? And are there distractions in the room? We had an experience with, well, we did from 2016 to 2019, a multi-day universal design for learning training. And we found out in one of our years that there was a stock ticker in the room. And it was so distracting that one person had reported that it may have potentially triggered a migraine for them. And so it's the sort of thing that you look out for, any sort of distractions in the room, lights that might be too bright, that sort of thing. So some things that I've unfortunately learned from my own experiences, not having done it properly. And when preparing to present, a couple quick things to do on slide 29, titled Preparing to Present. So for this presentation, we have live captioning available, but in some presentations, I've checked in with the workshop organizers to see if there are any requests that have been made from participants. One of the requests that's been made of me in the past was what I've been doing today, to read the slide number and the title of the slide before I begin to talk about a slide. So this is a habit that I end up maintaining in all presentation sense. If possible, can you share your presentation ahead of time? Because that can help interpreters, those who are doing live captioning. It can help the audience members if that is something that is possible to do. So, it's a lot of information here. Let's take a look at slide 30 for a moment, pause to consider. A lot of you probably use some of these strategies, right? Which ones do you use? Do you use any of these strategies? Are any of them something that are already part of your repertoire? As you're preparing your presentations? Or on a related note, are there any that you might use the next time you prepare your next presentation? And no problem. Yeah, there you go. I will try at least see what's available in the room. I'm going to get a presentation for my own. It's a great idea. Yep. And yep, contrast checker. That's in, yep, the contrast checker is an interesting one. Yep. So take a look to see what's available in the room. And especially if you're on your own like that. Looking to see, I find it sounds, we would assume our rooms are all set up so that everyone can see the screen, but that isn't always necessarily the case. So sitting down in a few different seats throughout the room and seeing, okay, if I'm giving my presentation, will everyone be able to see everything on my slides, all the way to the bottom of the slides too? Organizing my slides more carefully for accessibility. Yep, exactly. So organization, especially when we think about title plus content, this idea of the bullet points. Exactly, yep. Revising presentation size, presentation style, a bit to incorporate. Yep, excellent. So looking through and revising presentation slides, yep, excellent. Any of these strategies show students in creating their own presentations that we share with the rest of the class. Excellent. That's a great idea. Jennifer Smalls, I've had a hard time reading everyone's name. I apologize because I have a very small font on my other computer that's in front of me here. But this idea of sharing these ideas with your students and having students create more accessible presentations. Think about a public speaking class, or my goodness, in my Spanish 220 class that I teach, it's a cinema course, Introduction to Cinema. We give presentations. And I appreciate that suggestion because I haven't taught that course in a while. It's been many, many years since I taught that course, but next time I teach it, that's a great idea. I'm going to use on my own, is to teach these to students. So thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that suggestion too. That's an excellent idea. I want to move on just in the interest of time because I want to give some time for questions here at the end. So I'm going to try and finish up in the next 5 minutes or so. I'm going to kind of whip through very quickly the during and the after strategies. So I'm on slide 31, where it says giving a more accessible presentation during strategies. And so the idea is these are some things you can do while the presentation is going on to help it be more accessible to your audience. On slide 32, titled Beginning of the Presentation, a few things to do are to check in and make sure attendees hear you well. Make sure that your microphone is working in a virtual environment. Make sure that it's working in your physical environment too. Again, introducing yourself, let audience know how to refer to you. That could be a preferred name, the pronouns that you use. And Jamie very kindly did the last one here for me. Make participants aware of ASL interpreting, live captioning, or other accessibility features. Jamie did that for me, so I didn't have to do that today. I'm on slide 33, and it says beginning of the presentation 2. So another thing to do is to encourage participants to share their preferred name and the pronouns they use. So in Zoom, you can do this by changing your name. You can rename yourself. At an in-person presentation, you can use name tags or name placards on the table. In my classroom, I just write down the name on day 1 when I'm taking attendance. You'll notice I stated some guidelines for participating, and I'd recommend doing the same thing. Asking everyone to state their name when participating is helpful for ASL interpreters or for live captions. And then asking one person to speak at a time is also helpful for interpreters or for live captioning. I always like to state the objectives and kind of a summary of what's going to be covered. And this serves as an advanced organizer for all members of the audience. And it's especially important when providing access to everyone. And then, of course, make participants aware, if you're in person, of any accessible gender-neutral restrooms that are nearby, or wherever the restrooms are nearby, so they can access those as needed. I'm on slide 34 while presenting. And so, as you probably noticed, I like to pause after I advance a slide. And so I'd suggest doing the same thing as well. Pause after advancing a slide. And this can be especially helpful for someone who's working with an interpreter, because this allows the person to process the information on your slide before then turning their focus to the interpreter. You'll notice that after advancing to the next slide, I pause and then I read the slide number and title of the slide. And this can be helpful for someone who's using a screen reader to access the information on your slides. If there's important information, images, tables, figures, describe them. You don't need to describe images that are just decorative, but providing a description of visual content where the information is important can help many people. It can help someone who is blind or who has low vision, but also helps everyone to know what should we focus on in these images that we have. And something that I have a little bit of trouble with oftentimes is speaking slowly and clearly, and I have to remind myself to do that throughout. But it's especially important we consider the needs of someone who may have limited proficiency in the target language of the presentation. And finally, if there are any technical terms, such as, for example, alternative text, provide a definition of a technical term. This way, everyone can understand the information you're sharing with them. But again, it's especially important for someone who may have limited proficiency in the target language of the presentation. So I want to quickly jump to the after strategies. I'm going to jump to slide 37 that says following up on a more accessible presentation, so I can leave enough time for questions here at the end. On slide 38, it's titled Share. And one thing that I always suggest is share your resources with your attendees whenever possible. And so I'm going to, before the end of the presentation, again, copy and paste the link to the Google Drive folder so that you can go through and download these resources afterwards. And I'd recommend sharing your presentation slides. So sharing it as a PowerPoint file itself. PowerPoint has gotten very good about accessibility over many years. Back when I used to do presentations back in 2011, I used to tell everyone, don't even touch Office for Mac. Use Office for Windows if you want to be able to ensure more accessible resources for your participants. Exporting it to PDF, you'll see that I exported to PDF, which, although there are some issues in terms of accessibility with that PDF that I provided, I've also provided the PowerPoint, which should be more accessible. But I find that exporting it to PDF is also a great way for someone to go through and be able to just read the presentation afterwards. Sharing a captioned video, it can also be helpful if that's available and possible. You share a transcript. What's great about Zoom, I'm not sure if it works for everyone who has a Zoom membership, but I know one of my colleagues will oftentimes share a video with an auto transcript provided by Zoom. There can be a few laughs here and there by some of the things that are transcribed, but it is better than nothing, I'd say, if you're short on time and want to share a transcript of a meeting. And if you have access to a transcript, share with the organizers. For example, when I gave a talk recently for the Language Resource Center at Cornell University, I had shared a transcript of the presentation I gave and also a transcript of the podcast that we did. So they were able to put those up on their site so that both the YouTube video and the podcast that we did were more accessible to the audience. And finally, learn from the experience. This is the toughest one for me. I'm on slide 39, learn from the experience. So asking for feedback from participants is helpful. It could be a brief questionnaire. It could be, in the case of something like this, the workshop we have today, there may be a questionnaire that may be distributed on our behalf. If you give a webinar or presentation for a textbook publisher, they'll sometimes distribute a questionnaire on your behalf. Either way, gather those data, whether it be directly from the audience, from the sponsor of the event, and learn from your participants. And the toughest part is reading it with an open mind. So read the feedback, and we all know you can't please everyone all the time, and I understand that, but as presenters, we're human, we make mistakes. And so if a participant says an aspect of your presentation was not accessible, then that's something to pay attention to. And then, as hard as it may be, learn from it and adjust for next time. So a lot of the strategies that I've given you today come from research, but some of them come from my own experience and from feedback from participants who have been brave enough to be able to say, this was something that you could do better next time. And so I've taken that feedback to heart and tried my best to learn from it. And I encourage you to provide feedback to me so that if there is something that I can be doing better for each of you in the future, then I would be very happy to do so. And again, it's not easy. It's reading this with an open mind is important. And so I'd encourage you to do the same thing with your participants as you learn from them. So I have some practice activities. You can kind of work on them. You can work through them on your own if you want. But I simply wanted to skip ahead to slide 42, and it says conclusion. I just want to revisit our goals and objectives from the day and leave 5 minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions. So the overarching goal today, that you'll leave the talk knowing some strategies you can use to make your presentations more accessible. And our objectives were that you'd be able to apply strategies to make a presentation more accessible. So hopefully at least 3 before, 3 during, and 1 after. And then also to be able to use a checklist of strategies to help you create a more accessible presentation. So I'm hoping you've been able to achieve these objectives. The second one, the checklist of strategies, you may have to work on a little bit on your own time, but I have provided that for you in the bit.ly link, which I'll copy and paste in there again for you. I'd be curious to know if you think this is true. If so, you're welcome to give a comment to the chat to let me know yes or no. You're welcome to share any comments aloud. But basically, I'll put my own information here. Slide 44, this says thank you. You're welcome to email me at hromalik@sunyocc.edu or cdhromal@syr.edu. I'm also at www.christopherhermalik.com, which is my first and last name together, CHRISTOPHERHROMALIK. So any questions I'd be happy to answer for you if we have time for that. And I will end the show here and move my Zoom window so that I'm actually facing each of you too. There we go. Now I can see everyone. Did anyone have any questions? Anything I can help you with at all?
Yeah, Chris, there's a question from Rob in the chat. Do you need me to read it or are you okay with that?
I have it here. Yep. So it says, I've used the alt text feature in my PowerPoint slides to create images and figures. Okay, let me read this out loud here. So it says, I've used the alt text feature in my PowerPoint slides to describe images and figures, but then I converted my PowerPoint to PDF for upload. Does this eliminate the accessibility features? That's a great question. So my understanding is that it does maintain them. And at least it has. I remember it used to be, and I think I mentioned at one point in the talk that I didn't recommend Office for Mac for a long time because it did not maintain those for many, many years, up until they went to the Office 365 model where things kind of were more consistent from Windows to Mac. And so it used to be with Windows, I know, I would create a PDF that was accessible, and I would check things like alt text. I would be careful to make sure that I had different slide titles, that sort of thing. And then when I exported to PDF, I did remember checking it back in like 2011, 2012, that era. And yes, they were, all those things like alt text were maintained in the PowerPoint. I'll admit I haven't checked it since probably around 2012, 2013 for these sorts of, for accessibility. So, but my guess is it would have gotten better, not worse. So I would say that, yes, if you convert your PowerPoint to PDF for upload, it should maintain the accessibility features. I did have a student who the student preferred that I actually uploaded the actual PowerPoint itself. And so, you know, there's good and bad to that. I like the idea of uploading a PDF. I feel that I don't necessarily like to always give out my original PowerPoint. But then after working with the student, I said, well, okay, I'm not really losing anything by giving out my PowerPoint. So uploading the actual PowerPoint itself too, if you have both the PDF and the original, it does give choices to students, to audience members. If one is more accessible than the other, if they don't have Office, they can use the PDF, that sort of thing. So having those options is always helpful too. Excellent question. Is there anything else I can help with? Any other questions?
I think I have a question, if it's all right to ask. So I've seen a number of different presentation styles over the years, and I've seen some people who state that a more accessible presentation is actually to present the text and read all of the text and not do what you seem to do and what I'm more comfortable doing, which is making things more graphically appealing to those who are sighted. So what's your take on that? Is it either is fine or what?
Well, I would say, when preparing for this, when preparing for other presentations, there have been suggestions of read what's on the slide before continuing. I can understand that. I'm from more of my presentation style. I like to read the slide number and the title, allow the information that's there to be read, but then instead of reading exactly what's on the text, I'm saying something that is very similar to what's actually written in the text too. So in terms of what I'm actually saying, it tends to be pretty much what's written on there in the long run. And so that's been my style over the years. But at the same time, it's not unheard of for someone to say that it's more accessible to actually read what's on there too.
Okay.
So
I was just curious. I didn't want to, I present and I actually teach people how to present with the less is more kind of approach.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make sure I wasn't off on that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. Yep. So I had a participant in one of my workshops that I had given. He shared a really interesting anecdote where he had images on lots of different slides and didn't realize until afterwards that he had not described those images at all throughout the presentation. There were people who couldn't access them. And so that was something that this person shared, that yes, this is, I needed to describe these images. And so we all learn from our mistakes. It's unfortunate we make mistakes, but this is an opportunity to learn for all of us as we do this more and more often. And so if there are things that as participants you prefer I do, that if I've in any way not made my information accessible to you, I'd encourage you to let me know too. It does take a lot of courage, a lot of bravery to say that to somebody. And so I would appreciate that, of course. If there's anything that I can do to make my information more accessible to all of you, I'd greatly appreciate that for sure. So.
Right. I know that when I saw you present last June at a separate event, I was like, we need to talk about this more. This style of presentation is so amazing, and I would love to have other people see it. So thank you for agreeing to do this for us today. I really appreciate it very much. I'm going to take a lot of lessons from it.
Oh, thank you, Jimmy. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm honored to be able to work with all of you today.
And thanks to everybody for joining us today and for the great participation in the chat during this session. And thanks, Chris, for taking the time to do this and share your knowledge with us.
Thank you,
All right, I'm
Jamie.
going to stop the recording.